Alyssa, welcome to the Change Champions podcast. So lovely to to have you here. We're actually in the same time zone. I'm so used to talking to people all over the world. It's like refreshing. You're actually like in my backyard. I mean, not in
No.
like a creep, like not actually, not in a weird way, but like we're in the same time zone. I'll say we're both in the
Yeah.
Hudson Valley, which is awesome. How are
Love.
you this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's nice to talk to a neighbor, right? I could just give you a high five over the fence. Top.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I've seen this stupid clip of people like going to give someone a high five and they're like running through buildings and they keep going back and forth and it winds up being miles and miles and miles apart. But I kind of getting that sort of vibe. Speaking of vibes, I'm curious. We were just talking a little bit about kind of morning routines and things like that. But for people who have never met you or listened to you before or seen you before, do you mind just sharing, like, in a nutshell, what what you do? Like, we'll unpack some of your backstory in a second here because I think there's a lot there. But just like fast forward through all that to today, if people are like, who's Alyssa? What she's about? What is she about? Who she work with? What she do? Can you fill us in on that?
Sure, sure. Well, Alyssa today is a holistic life and career coach. And I work with women who are at a crossroads, a crossroads to be exact. Um, what I find is that we often in this moment get stuck on career, because we define ourselves by that. Okay. And of course, we feed ourselves and we feed our families, and there's a whole lot that's important. Okay. But for me, I've had to push the life into this because I'm realizing when clients came to me and only went full force at career, they were missing one of the important pieces that they actually needed to land what they wanted to land. So, hence a holistic life and career coach. That's me in a nutshell.
I'm I'm really interested in and I feel like the word balance
Mm,
almost gets overused, so I kind
mhm.
of don't want to use it, but
Yep, yep,
I'll call it the intersection or the integration between when you like the word holistic and then
yeah,
also the career piece.
yep.
I've even found like culturally, I don't know how many different places or countries or where your clients come from exactly, but I found that across the globe, different cultures that those things mean very different things. And obviously, if you're working with someone on an individual basis, I'm sure that that is something you would personalize. But from your experience, what's your take on that on those that intersection and like the balance, I'll just say, between those, the work piece, but then the big picture, the holistic, like what how would you define that, like what does that really look like?
Mm. The balance between the two. So yeah, balance is a word that I think it's almost like a bad word because it feels like
Yeah.
this thing that we want to achieve that's pretty much impossible, because
Yes.
I think it's really about just shifting where you're deciding to prioritize focus, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I help folks who are maybe in a state of high anxiety or really like amped up excitement even about career continue to feel excited, pump down, push down a little bit of anxiety by finding this holistic piece, taking that step back and looking at your life as a whole and thinking, okay, what do you want this to look like? What are we looking to achieve long term? The researchers say we focus on our short term so much, but if we don't take that time to step back and look at that bigger picture, I feel like I actually have seen we end up recreating the same circumstance in a different situation or with different scenery, you know?
Yeah, it almost, so the word that comes to mind is almost that's better than all the ones we've used so far is probably alignment. It's
Mm,
kind of like I feel like that's what you're describing. And
absolutely.
to even be able to do that, what you are helping people to do, and specifically women, and it sounds like probably high achievers,
Yeah.
like people who, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a spectrum here, and I found even with our own clients, like we work with coaches and consultants more on the business side of things, and there's some people who really need like a kick in the ass, and I'm like, hey, come on, let's get to it. Like, well, you gotta. This is pretty straightforward. Like, let's just cross check off the boxes, okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And then there's other people who I start to like even bring up that conversation. And there's one client that comes to mind in particular. And she would always tell me when we were working together, she would say, Riley, I don't need any of that. whatever, like when I say I'm gonna do something, it gets done. And she was a powerhouse, and she was much more what you're describing, which is like okay, let's slow the roll, let's like big
Yes.
picture, let's zoom
Yes.
out a little bit. So there's
Yeah.
this like
Mm,
there's a spectrum here, and it
yeah.
sounds like you're really focusing more on one side of it, or so I'm hearing. It seems like.
Yeah. You know what? Alignment. So to bring it back to your word, yes.
Mm,
Alignment absolutely with our values, what you are looking to create in your life, right? Because that is what we're talking about as our ends. And the career is a means to help you get there. But we need to remember that this is our life we're living and the career is a piece of it, but it's not your whole life. And so you're right, women who are high achievers who are used to just like you described, lovingly described that client who are just like, hey, I don't need that accountability crap. Like I'm getting it done. I absolutely have clients who are just like that. And I go, I'm not bothering. And there are others where we create the accountability document and they want me to check in on them once, maybe twice a week. And I know that's part of how they roll. So when I say I cringe a little bit even at high achiever. I really
okay,
do, because
tell me
what
why.
is that? And what
Yeah.
is success? And how do we define it? And it's different to everyone.
Okay.
So, but I maybe driven, maybe tenacious. These are
Okay.
words that
Sure.
I've used a lot because I'm like, what do we what is it? And if people look at me,
Yeah.
they're like, so you're coaching? What have you what? Right? How could you know what I mean? So it's success is self-defined. And I also help people to see that. Success is self-defined. How do you see that? And what does a successful life look like? Because I know you're
Mm.
going to tell me what a successful career looks like, but have you stopped to think what that life also looks like?
I love that. I love that. And also, just to backtrack a little bit here, teasing apart like high achieving doesn't have to, like, there's a personal aspect to that, like that definition of success you were saying.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
love what you've teased out is something I find that's really common in successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I know I'm using the word success again, but I think
No, it's okay.
entrepreneurship, let's just
Don't worry
say
about your
you have
words
a
with me.
you have a business that is running and going and growing,
Yep.
and it's really a bias towards action.
Mm.
And I think
Mhm.
that's part of like that driven, yeah,
Yes.
drive, that kind of thing. So, okay,
Love that.
the big picture piece, I think I want, like, that feels very future, like that's one direction of conversation, and I want to just put a pin in that for a second and kind of like rewind and play catch up here, because it sounds like, for context, especially for listeners to better understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
we could keep defining words all day, but I think just hearing a little bit of story helps to kind of shortcut that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have probably a lot of overlap here in your own backstory, your own, like, your personal story of how you even came to this realization in the first place, and like kind of your transformation, what you went through. Can you give us kind of a recap of like where did this story begin on, yeah, Alyssa's career life path?
So it's beautiful to get to come back to it from a place where I know my values and I am living more closely aligned with my values now. And I was living very aligned with my values for a lot of my life too, but there were a couple that were changing and I didn't recognize that. So that's something we can come back to. But for me, I've been an educator, an elementary educator for, gosh, how was I? I was almost 18 years. And I taught in progressive schools and private schools. And what was amazing about that path for me, which was a very long one, which helped me to become a professional, which helped me to find aspects of myself, was that I was lifting others. It's a service profession, clearly, but I'm also helping them to find what about them shines, their unique genius, and how they can use that in social settings all over the place, you know? So education was wonderful for me, a value for me that is lifelong learning or growth, always improving, right? And you could see like the driven, the tenacious there. So for me, I wasn't satisfied. I would did one age group and I was like, okay, let me go to a different one. Okay, I'll be the team leader here. Oh wait, I'm getting married now. I don't want to lead. This is a heck of a lot. Oh, Alyssa, I think you need to keep leading. Oh yeah, really? Well, I see there's a job in that grade level I'm going. So, I was always wanting to do something that would push me further, not satisfied to just sit because I felt like I was missing out on growth, which was just offering more to the world and feeling just passionate about what I did. And I ended up teaching internationally in Korea. And I lived there for 5 years. And that was after after that other jump and then leading that team. It was like, what next? And in education, you're either you're admin or you're a teacher, and I thought like, oh, there's that in between zone. Maybe I'll do curriculum, maybe I'll coordinate that. But that one job wasn't available. And I was like, I need more. What can you give me? What more is there here? And so I did start facilitating workshops for other international educators. And that was exciting. Long story is getting long. I ended up in Korea and I taught there for 4 years. And I had the first year off just kind of building a home there and learning how to live in a country where I didn't speak the language. And what I realized was no matter which setting I was in, if I was going to be an elementary educator, I was kind of hitting the point where there wasn't going to be a whole lot brand new unless I was working really hard, doing my own backflips to create it. I found a coach there, and she helped me to do things really flip the classroom, really put so much onus on the students. And it was wonderful. And I presented internationally about that. And again, I was like, why is this not feeling like enough? And there was that nagging voice. And I'm not sure I ever would have changed path. I'm not sure it ever would have happened, Riley, had I not had a very steep, short period of personal upheaval. I have to call it that. And that changed everything. That kind of shook me awake. Like, do you realize what you're doing, Alyssa? Do you realize that you keep nothing's enough? You're going somewhere else, but you're staying in the same situation.
So if I press pause right there, just to make sure I'm following along, right? Like, so started as a teacher.
Yep.
And when you say lead, is that really the admin kind of?
No. So it's admin it's almost like a lower level admin layered on top of teaching. So you do it as well.
Right.
So,
okay. So it's that space between yours.
Yeah, parent facing, curriculum organizing, and leading your team and planning.
And you were teaching different grades, was there a specific subject that you were?
It was everything. It was everything, including math, science, social
just
science.
Teacher through and through, different ages. Are you familiar with Carol Dweck's work and growth mindset? Okay,
yeah.
That's so for people who haven't ever heard. I would just say I think it's just called Mindset, the book.
Mm-hmm. Growth mindset, fixed mindset.
Yeah, it sounds like you embodied a growth mindset, and you just like have this
desire.
Is vivacious the right word? There's just like you just have this hunger to just learn and grow and learn and grow.
Yeah.
And obviously hindsight's 2020, so this might not have been apparent at the time, and maybe I'm making an assumption here, but tell me if I'm wrong. I almost get this feeling of like, how and like there's the main earthquake and then there's aftershocks.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of like reversed, where there's like these little tremors or cracks that are like you're getting this feeling, you don't know what it is, but then it wasn't until this big event, which we'll fast forward back to in a second here, the earthquake, I'll call it, that like just that opened everything up.
Yeah.
Am I kind of
I love
looking
that.
back? Does that feel accurate? Okay.
I love that. It's almost like whatever you believe in. I was being sent these signs from myself.
Messages, yeah.
Right? Messages like, hey, this isn't good, But it did take the big one. It took the big quake to oh, it's here. Oh, this is where I am right now. Okay. My eyes are now open.
So how long was this stretch of time, by the way? Like your teaching career up until the Korea earthquake, I'll call it.
17 years.
So this is like, you're in it. This is not just like 1.5 years or something like that.
No. And I loved it. And I loved so much of it, right?
Yeah.
But I was always like, what else?
I also just while we're here, because I think that this is, for someone who's listening or maybe they're seeing you talk about this for the first time, and they're interested in your work as well, because I think I would imagine that there are people, and specifically women, that you do help or could help, that have probably some of these feelings where they don't even know what they are, and you've only learned what they are through experience and then hindsight. But that's also where having a coach can be helpful in not having to wait 17 years for a big earthquake to knock you on your ass right? And so it seems like it's not necessarily that I'm not even necessarily hearing that you had like regrets per se. Like it's like you enjoyed so much of it, but there was also some of these inklings of like what the next chapter is actually going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like I don't regret any of it. You're absolutely right. I don't regret it. I think I needed to go through all of that. I needed to
Hmm.
go through all of it because very logical. I had that my logical brain is really loud. And so logically it made sense. Try a new grade level. Try to teach two grades at once together in one classroom, mix it up. Great. Try to get the students setting their own learning goals and see if you can meet them there and group them. Right. So there's always, I went down a little rabbit hole there, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of the next chapter.
Yeah.
There's this I guess documentary on Netflix. I can't remember. I think it's just called like Stutz. I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
Jonah Hill, the actor,
Oh
and
yeah.
his
Or-
therapist, and they anyway, it's
Yeah.
awesome. And given psychology, my master's degree in counseling, like that's my original background. It's like I was gravitated towards it.
Yes.
Anyway, the just to capture what you're saying, there's this one analogy or this tool that the therapist had used, and he called it just like pearls on a string.
Mm,
And he said like you can only go one direction in life, and it's just it's kind of taking information for what it is and not becoming too attached to any one thing. And it's
mm.
just like adding another. It's like you're just another pearl on the string. Kind of the next chapter idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just like one
Yes.
thing at a time. The next thing. The
Yeah,
next thing. Yeah.
it's contributing. It's helping you to evolve slowly. It's not like you snap the whole thing and you drop all your pearls and you go, right, new one. You're going, okay,
Let's
but
make
we're
a new
on.
shape. It's
Yeah.
like nope, you're on that string. Yeah.
And we don't
Um,
remove it. That's another beautiful part of that metaphor you're bringing up. You're not removing it. It's still
mhm.
there. It's still a part of you. And you can also evolve, you know?
Yeah, and depending on your fashion sense, I'd guess that like if one was like a black pearl, that probably adds a little something, like a little zhuzh or whatever the word is. That's not my world. So moving on to the earthquake. So you had this one major. Now I'm like, I feel like we're hyping. Well, anyway, you let's. I'm gonna shut up. You put it in your words. You were in Korea.
Yep.
You'd had a 17-year teaching career at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
You were adapting to a different culture and language, and there's so lots of changes. But it
Yes.
seemed, but then there's one big change.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were two concurrently, and then okay. Well, there were two. So the first one was separating from my husband. That was something we had decided in the summer, right before the big event. We decided we were going to do it, and it's almost crazy to say that's not the big event, but that was part of it. That was time, and then we tried lots of things. We'd exhausted all avenues, I actually want to say, and we realized, okay, it is time. We'll figure it out when we're back in Korea. We always came back to America for the summer, so that was in August before the event. Then I decided, hey, you know what? It's time. I want to be back in the States. I think I've been searching for something that I'm not going to find outside of myself. I'm going to find it inside of myself. I don't need to be in a foreign country anymore to realize that. I want to go back to New York, and I don't know where, but I'm going back to New York. That happened within a month. So that's in September. And I remember sitting with my boss, and he said, "What's your plan?" And I said, "I don't know, but I know me, and I know it will be a good one." So that was Alyssa. Before she even had a plan, I decided, hey, yeah, I'm going to see the year out, but in June I will be leaving. So that I'm going back to New York. I will figure it out. But then my mom passed away six days after that. And for me, that she was my person, especially if you're somebody who's lived internationally. It's really important that you have that sense of home, that person you return to, that there's no pretense, nothing challenging. She was my person. She was that person. And here I was about to go through divorce, about to do an international and job change. Obviously, I wouldn't hold the same job. And then there went my person, you know, that that was my shakeup. That was my earthquake right there. I had no choice but to experience all of the feelings that I probably had been holding in as a mom, as a teacher, as just somebody who is always goal focused. I finally had to kind of let those floodgates open and feel the things that I didn't know I had been avoiding feeling. Start to grieve all of those losses together.
If I'm hearing you right, it sounds like what that shook up for you was, yeah, I guess kind of all these like bottled up feelings or emotions or just experiences, and just kind of I don't know if this is accurate or not, so tell me if this resonates. But when we were talking about earlier the alignment between work, career, and life in that
Mm,
holistic picture,
yep.
it seems like maybe up until this point there was much more of a skew slant. I don't know, you were leaning more towards the career side,
Yeah.
and it seems like this kind of broke that scale, and it
Yeah.
just,
Yep.
I don't know if the floodgates or what, how you want to describe it, but it seems like that's it. Just when you talk about that kind of that driven person, it seems
Mm.
like that was and is very much you. But I guess if you're always driving, sometimes you need to take, like, a rest stop, or go get out and go smell the roses, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Check your GPS. Make sure you're going where you want to go in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had checked my GPS, right? I was like, okay, redirect, here we go. We're going to Korea. Don't regret that either, because I finally found myself when I peeled away all of the beautiful groups of friends I'd always found myself in and the roles I found myself in. And that's who I am. That's who I am. Hold on. When you peel everything away, I actually was like, whoa, who am I? Who is this person? Because all these groups of friends aren't here. And now you're taking away the marriage, and now you're taking away this. And now you're no longer her daughter. Who are you? Who do you want to be? Became what I decided to ask myself. Because when I stared and I said, who am I? And I didn't know, that was terrifying. So what I did was, when you said bias to action earlier, I wrote that down because I was like, here we go. No, no, no. Hold on. Who do I want to be? Because all my strings are still there. I still have all of that, right? And if I need to define myself with words to somebody who says, hi, who are you? What do you do? Tell me in a nutshell, right? I've got my string, right? But for me, it's like, who do I want to become? And I can be focusing on who I want to become. And what if that's my destination, not the next title? What if, what if who I want to become is who I decide to be today? And I do that again and again. And I'm
Mm.
comfortable screwing up. Sorry for the language. And I'm comfortable going, tried that on, not a fan of that. Right. And just continuing to lean into, I like to grow, I like to learn. And I am not defined by a title or whatever's in my bank account, right? I get to define success on my terms, not on the terms I thought mattered, because that's what we're taught. We're conditioned to believe, maybe.
Yeah, I'm hearing the identity piece come
Mm,
into the conversation,
yeah.
and it's also, there's like this intentionality that I think is interesting. When we were talking before about like the spectrum of, the people that need the the kick in the ass
Yeah.
versus the people that need to like pump the brakes and
Yeah.
check the GPS.
Yeah.
It sounds like either way, you're still checking the map. Like, that's sort of the, I don't even like to use the word middle, but it's like that's the alignment piece where it's like just having the awareness, the intention, and deciding. And I mean, we do the same thing when we're working with people in business. It's like
Yeah.
how you define success for your business is completely up to you. But to have a business, you do need to have some clients. Like, if you're not selling anything, it's not a business. And some people need to wrap their heads around that.
Yeah.
But then also there's people who, for us, we work with people who have, this revenue stream and this revenue stream and this project, and I'm going to do this course, and I'm going to launch this thing, and I'm doing, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, is that really, you're pulling yourself in 18 different directions? Is that really what you want your life to look like? And does that feel
Yes.
scalable, or forget scalable, sustainable? And so either way, whichever direction we're coming from, it sounds like we're both pointing in the same, or whichever place we're coming from, it sounds like we're pointing in the same direction, which is this living with intention. And the
Mm.
word clarity, I know, is going to be important for, it's funny, it's for both of us in different ways. But I guess before we even get there, I'm wondering your take on the identity piece. Specifically, I've heard arguments just go in circles between like the being versus doing.
Mm.
I'm really curious to get your take on that, though, given this the kind of space that you're in.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh, I hear Yoda talking to me, right? There is no try, just do. But for me, I think I really can't answer. You're like chicken and the egging me. It's really hard. So Honestly, I feel like we have the plan, and I think as we are doing, we are becoming, right? But you have to decide that you get to be. You're in charge of so many things you don't think you are, right? Oh, I can't. That's not now. What you could. What if you did? And so, what if you did? There's so much of that. Oh, I shouldn't. Why? Says who? Is there anyone here? Right? All the time. All the time. We hear that. We box ourselves in. So, there is this, okay, you don't believe you can. Well, you don't believe you are. Do the thing until you do believe that you are, right? Do until you believe that you are. Because honestly, you probably already are, but you might not believe it until you've started to do it.
Which is very different. I sometimes I hear people talk about this and they're like, "Oh, it's like you're saying fake it till you make it," and it's like that. No, what you just said is very different. It's it's so one of the things so backing up a little bit.
Mm.
Obviously, we focus much more on the business side of things, but like at the heart of any business is still there's still human involved, and
Yeah.
so I've kind of come full circle in my own story, starting off in psychology, sports psychology, mental performance coach. Thought I was moving away into operations and business, and like the furthest thing from it, and yet here we are having this conversation, and we work with coaches and consultants and very heart centered, impact driven people.
Mm.
And so one of the things that we touch on is kind of that mindset, human side.
Yeah.
And one of the specific lessons we cover that's coming up for me right now that's coming to mind is I believe I first got this from a book called The Confidence Gap. For anyone that's interested, they talk about it's by Dr. Russ Harris, and it talks about I think it's acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a lot of different modalities that are in there. So super fun read. I took lots of notes. One of the things that stood out from it is the idea of confidence not being. So today we talk about confidence, the feeling,
Mm.
and what he describes, I think it's the etymology of the word of like the where it originally came from and what it meant was not so much a feeling, but it was almost like faith. It was almost the lack of like you would do something it was an action, a verb. Like you
Mm.
had to act. You couldn't, and I don't mean act like theater. I mean act like you would take action.
Yep.
And so the lesson from that part of the book was that confidence, the action, will always precede confidence, the feeling. And I think that's what you're describing is that it's not fake it till you make it. It's acknowledging that I don't feel very confident right now, or I don't have a lot of belief right now because there's not a lot of evidence to support. And that's
Yeah.
but you still have to start somewhere. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that's part of the support and the maybe some of the confident feeling that you can help to inject in someone to get them to make that shift or make that change.
Yeah, that self-belief, right? Because we want to see the evidence. If you are action driven or you're tenacious or you're a high achiever, you want that evidence to know that something is safe, that something's a sure deal. But sometimes you got to take a risk to get a big payoff, don't you? Right?
Yeah, it's interesting that I feel like there's these sort of two strands. So
Mm.
I wonder how this if you have something to add to this because the like half formed thought in my head is there's a lot of times to get to where we get to, like you say yes to everything. And then
Mhm.
eventually, you have too many opportunities that aren't high quality enough and you just start saying no to things. And
Yep.
so in a similar regard, I think it's this sort of, you can take a lot of risk, especially let's say you're younger, earlier in your career, you can take a lot of risk and maybe if you never have, you still need to at some point take more risk. But the further you go or the more that you have, it can be harder. I think it feels like you want to take less and less
Yeah.
risk, but that also means that there's less and less opportunity for
Change
positive change.
growth. Yeah, change your growth. Absolutely. There was something that you were saying before about, yeah, as we get older. Hold on, I want to actually follow your train right here. As we get older, I think there's a lot of the shoulds or can'ts that come up even louder. And the ironic thing is that remember your string. Remember how string, look at all of the things that you are leaning on. Sure, you're competing against people who are much younger than you, but what don't they have that you have? right? What are you able to bring that they can't bring? And I think that helping folks who are going perhaps pivoting, going to a totally new industry or field, and that is feeling scary. I think helping them to go back and see places in their lives where they have shown resilience, where they didn't expect themselves to do that, where they have overcome and against all odds or against their own even belief in themselves, or they didn't think and then it worked out anyway. I think helping folks to remember that, that can be the evidence. Like instead of looking for the very, very tangible evidence, this, then this happens because we want a surefire path because we're terrified of failing and everyone's watching and everyone's going to see it. I think we can start to fall a little more back on our own character and what we know of ourselves when we are facing hard things, you know?
Yeah, that's straight out of one of my psychology courses.
Is
So I would say, yeah. So
dual
kudos to you.
major once
That's
upon a time, but it's
yeah.
yeah.
um,
Really.
there's. Did you have another? I don't want to
No.
disrupt your train.
No,
Okay.
no, you're not. No, you're not.
There's two things that come to mind to me here as we kind of get towards the
Mhm.
end of
Yeah.
this episode, this conversation. So it's probably more internal. So I think I'd like to start there. And so, as you've made this change, you've started your own business. We've like talked all around that, but you are now a coach and
Mhm.
a full time one.
Yep.
How many years in are you at this point now?
I'm getting close to 2 now.
Okay, so
Yep.
you're you're in it,
In it.
and for you to like, I mean, talk about career change. Not only is that a career change, but it's a lifestyle change. I mean, when you're starting your
Absolutely.
own business, that's a totally different beast. How have you, so for people who are listening who are even either thinking about like that kind of a pivot, or maybe if there's another coach consultant who's listening and is like, oh man, how's she doing it? How, just, I guess, and this can be super high level here. I recognize that, but even just from, I'll say an emotional standpoint, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word, but
Yeah.
you know, define that how you want. How have you adapted, adjusted, and continued to lean into and grow through that transition of starting your own business and making it work? I mean, from as with responsibilities as a parent, you know, income, roof over your head, like, but then also making an impact. And there's a lot of things to juggle. How are you juggling all of it?
Beautiful question. I think one of the most important things is choosing where to focus my energy. What is most important? And I do that daily, but I also do it by week. I also do it by month. And I also step back and I look at my year. So, what are my priorities? Right. And when I'm looking at priorities, it's not just the business because my brain just wants to do all the things, right? It's not just the business. It's seeing myself holistically and saying, "Hey, the business won't thrive if Alyssa is not thriving." I'm getting really good at gosh, there's so many practices, but let me say, to start my day with an intention and to end my day with gratitude and reflection that helps me to make sure that I am checking back. I'm taking a quick glance at the GPS to see how to go today, right? Is there something I need to tweak? Was there something that's missing? Wow, it's been how many days since I've hung out with a friend just to hang out? And it wasn't just like a mom talk over like dropping a kid off. Like, when did you hang out with somebody? So, for me, some of the pillars that I realized becoming a single mom when moving to a brand new community that I never lived in, I built myself a steep old mountain there. I really did. And I'm still climbing. What allows me to do so and to be okay despite and actually in all of the changes going around me all the time is acceptance that change is a thing that we're all going through, right? And I'm actually getting exceptionally good at riding with the waves, right? But in those waves, I also know that I need a sense of community. So finding ways to volunteer, finding ways to go back to my old skills as a teacher and pop in and help that drama department rock. So community, looking carefully at my time and where it's going, right? And that comes in the reflection at the end of the day. Did I put any time into my physical health, or did I skip lunch again? Did I get outside, or did I stay and stare at a screen all day?
Yeah, that
Right?
holistic piece. Yeah.
Right. The holistic piece. And I realized, oh my gosh, all of it feels terrible when I put all of my eggs in that business basket. I have to step back begrudgingly sometimes and remember that my energy in my business is reflective of the energy that I'm putting into myself and aspects of community, like community and where I'm spending my time, meditation, spirituality for me. I found that after I lost my mom, I didn't have that. But this undiagnosed human with ADD that you're talking to today finally found meditation and journaling and stillness, which I never had invited to my life before because I was always too busy. And which is why I
Mm,
didn't know who I was, which is why the question then became, who do I want to become? And
yeah.
meditation helped me to get there. The final piece I want to say is help, asking for help, not being too proud to say, whoa, being an entrepreneur is nothing I went to school for. Like I teetered. I was like dual majoring psychology and education. And then I ended up going education, but I was on that teeter totter for a while. But starting a business was definitely not something I considered. But when
Yeah.
I looked at my day as an educator, I said, what do I excel at? What gives me the goose? I actually would give myself goosebumps routinely in a day. And when did it happen? When I was helping other people, when I was helping them to understand themselves better and make decisions about who they wanted to be that day and the next day.
So much of what you said resonates, and I'm like replaying it in my mind, like the focus, the
Sorry.
community. Like, shameless plug here. We have put something together, a little mini course that's called the Leverage Game, and we have 6 rules of leverage, and focus is one of them. And so
Mhm.
we unpack, what these things are, how you can use them, super high level. It's like under an hour's worth of content, and all free. And we currently also have a community that you also mentioned that is also free, that is part of that in the same place. But it sounds like you found these things on your own, before we ever connected. And then that help piece, I mean, it's fun. Like for what comes up for me is that identity part as well, because like you said, not being too proud or not having, like, it's not letting ego get in the way.
Yeah.
And I think that is where like identity starts to play a role.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, so my dad passed away unexpectedly, a few years into my entrepreneurial journey. And for me, I didn't realize until I almost want to say that moment, but that's not true. It was in therapy thereafter that so much of my identity was wrapped up in becoming successful for him, because he had multiple
Yeah.
back surgeries. He was permanently disabled. He lived in a shithole, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
and that just ate at me. And I just wanted to be able to help. And up until that point, I mean, same as you, I think my first year in business, I made like $7,000, and I was like, what am I doing here? I I have a master's degree. I had a career path. I have all these things. I mean, I made more money working part time in college, and I was like, I have a lot of other skill sets that I could be using here, but I kept at it. And then that event happened, and oddly enough, my business started to take off comparatively. But it wasn't until that help piece. It wasn't until I actually invested in myself
There you
and
go.
my business and the develop like that. That was up until that point. I had never earned 6 figures in my life, and the year that I decided to actually do that and kind of get out of my own way was the first year that I cracked 6 figures.
Yeah.
Go figure. And so, I share that piece of my story, A, because I think I resonate with a lot of what you're saying, but
Yeah.
B, for people listening too. I wanted to make this distinction. There's one thing you said here in the help investing in yourself. I think it was in asking for help.
Mm.
I think there is something that I felt like could easily turn into an excuse. And I'm trying to replay this and not lose the
I think
thought
it's
in my.
an excuse to not ask for help, you're saying.
Yeah, and I think it's, oh, you know what it is? It's so the word, I'll just use the word balance again.
Yep.
So so I'll try to unpack this and see if it lands for you. When when you said, so I think you said put all your eggs in, when you put all your eggs in one basket, like
Yeah. Like just
not so
career.
good.
Just
Yes.
that. Everything
Yeah.
else was, yeah.
What I have found personally is that oftentimes we go through like seasons. We have like a sprint, or
Mhm.
and that might be months or years, or it could be days or weeks, or it even could be you get. And so in sports psychology, we call this a flow state, which is by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me how to spell that name, but you can go Google it. And so it could be a matter of hours where you are just locked in and
Yep.
completely focused. And it sounds like what you've cracked for yourself is the, and again, I think it comes from, I think you've had this within you, is you had the it's not just the drive, but it's like you're very present. Like
Mm,
it's that focus and presence. And I feel like what I am fearful of for people listening, specifically in this space, I think oftentimes that almost like how, I don't know if you've ever seen self-care used as an excuse to just not have any action, to not have to not do
yeah.
work. It's like, oh, I'm just
Yes.
gonna sit on the couch and watch Netflix. That's not really what
Yeah.
self-care is.
Yeah.
Different conversation, but in the same vein,
Mm,
it's that idea that it's almost like it's, to me, what you're saying is it's not like it's okay to work really hard
yeah.
for 8 straight hours
Yep.
and stay focused and not distract yourself with 18 coffee breaks or scrolling your phone, or it's like the at the smallest level. I'm trying to give specific examples for people listening. I know we're on the same page here, but I want to make sure that, like, have you ever seen that? And I just want to make sure anyone listening doesn't let that turn into an excuse to not, and it doesn't mean not work harder. It's either, like we said, for either end of the spectrum. It's like to not live your best life, to not be
Mm,
aligned and be honest with yourself of whether you need to push harder or whether you need to pull back. It almost doesn't matter. It's just, are you actually in alignment with yourself, your values? Are you living and doing what you say you want to be doing?
yeah. You're speaking a lot of what you're saying pulls me back to self-awareness. You're calling it like
Yes.
presence and that just self-awareness, not just of the piece of you that is getting things done, taking things off productively, but your whole self. We're talking your emotional self, your spiritual self, right? Your physical body, actually. Like all of that and your awareness is huge. And I think the folks that this is why reflection as an educator is such a crucial part of any lesson you teach. If you skip that synthesis at the end, if you skip them making meaning, pulling out, recognizing some moment of learning, you are missing so much. You're missing basically most of the lesson, right? You could have just thrown the whole thing out. Everyone could have just sat and twiddled their thumbs. You got to think, what am I aware of now that I wasn't aware of before? How is this
Integrating the
feeling?
learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
pulling that. What am I learning today? And the self-compassion piece has got to be layered on, and I think this is for a lot of my clients, the women at a career crossroad, especially those who are really tenacious, are like cracking the whip on their own maybe they're riding a horse, right? They're just cracking the whip on themselves at all hours of the day. Yes,
Yeah.
to a flow state, you get so much done in. Come on, as former marathon runner, I know this. But yes, also to the rest day. Yes, also to that. That is where our clarity comes a lot of the time. There's that season for doing, and there is that season for making sure whatever the heck you're doing so busily, like you said, aligns with who you want to be and what
Yeah.
these goals are. And often
Yeah.
those are linked to feelings, not to achievements. And we tend to forget that. Our ultimates are how we want to feel. They're not so that next mount we want to climb because you get there and you go, this is it. This is it, right? It's about a feeling. What do you want to feel? And you can feel that today. How can you feel it today? What's one
Mm.
small step you can take today to feel that? And then watch tomorrow. You sitting down and trying to be productive will be a heck of a lot better, won't it?
So speaking of, can you tell us a little more, like, again, I said this earlier, but we've still been doing it. We've talked circles around, in and out, probably, of the kind of work that you do. But to give people like something to actually hang their hat on, like, can you add more context and structure to, like, what actually is on offer for you? Like, how do you work with individuals? Fill us in. What
Yeah.
does that look like? What's it called? What do you do?
So, as I said earlier, I love this. I love this. clarity is one of the biggest and the
Yeah.
first pieces, and it ties into the self-awareness we were just talking about right there. And I feel like I'm like, ah, he just threw that at me so we could go right into clarity, didn't he? I think when we're at a career crossroads, lots of high achieving women come to me and said, look at my resume. I want to go. I want the next thing. And usually I say, pause for a moment. What is it that you want to achieve? Why and who are you? What is this feeding? What feels not aligned right now? What needs to get into alignment? Okay, now we can get you started. So the first piece when we work together, there are a couple ways I work with women, okay? And the first piece right now was this small exciting container that I've created is the Career Clarity Accelerator. In just 4 weeks, what we do is we help you come back to yourself. Maybe you've worked so hard, you've worked your ass off, but it's not feeling right. And maybe you've gotten these little tiny earthquakes along the way and you don't want that big one. You don't need to have that big one. But what you do need is to stop, pump the brakes, check the map, see what you want to be creating, right? And I love meeting women in that space. And in 4 weeks, there's so much that we can do to get you clear on where you want to be and looking honestly and compassionately at where you are now and helping you set these smaller goals to help you get your energy balanced. Because if you're about to go on and consider a career path change, your energy has got to be solid. You're putting yourself through a lot of stress. So that's another piece of my program. So clarity, honestly, this Career Clarity Accelerator, the 4 weeks, I've lifted it, I've stolen it from my signature program. But what I typically do is work for 4 months with women at a career crossroads, and we're getting them clear in the beginning. That's the first piece. And then the next piece, what we're doing is the energy, and we continue that throughout. Okay. So getting your energetics lined up, and strategy is big. I think so many of us are lost, or we're wasting our energy by looking and looking and saying, who will want me? Who will want me? Scrolling, rather than thinking, what do I want to create? How can I attract the opportunities to me?
Kind of that, it's scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset in a
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
100%.
And when you earlier you said there's that logic piece of you. And so if you were to speak to that piece and that piece only, and let's say someone out there is just incredibly logic driven and they hear the word energy and they're like, I
Yeah.
don't know what that means.
Yeah.
What non-energy words would you use to describe
Yep.
in maybe in different words what that means or what that feels
Yep.
like? Yeah.
Focus, focus, right? Strategy, right? If you're focused, what are you focused on? Vision, what is it that you're creating? Oh gosh, you said something after that besides the energy. Networking, branding, right? Overcoming fears and limiting beliefs. Noticing that language that you're using that's indicative of whatever the heck has been holding you back, because you're a smart person, you get things done, but for some reason right now it's not getting done and you know you need help. So go ahead and get that help so you can figure out how to get clear, get your vision, get your focus.
You know, what's so interesting to me is like, so what comes to mind is a client that we worked with in our program for nearly a year. And I remember what you're describing now is like, there's some specific, like there's the skills and the tactics and those detailed logical things. And I remember this person had picked up all those things, had basically done everything right,
Yeah.
and was really struggling. So, and again, our program, like we're talking about building like a sales pipeline and actually like launching a new offer and clarifying your offer and making sure that it's compelling. And so it's like all the business side of your coaching or consulting practice. And he just was getting to the finish line, the end zone, the red zone, and just fumbling. He just, something was off.
Yeah.
And what it actually came down to, even though we'd already checked all the other boxes, and usually it goes the other way around, but in this instance, it was exactly what you're saying, was the energy, the vibe, it was that really what it was that scarcity mindset taking over. Just
Yeah.
saying, oh, I'm like that desperation, like the in sales. Again, not my original background, but I've heard this term used when you reek of commission breath, and it's like that. I'm just here to get. I don't give a. I don't care
Yeah.
about you at all. I just want the sale. And
Yeah.
that's like not like we teach the concept of like sales as a service. And you're
Yes.
here to help people. Like why are we doing this anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you should be, otherwise you're probably in the wrong
Mhm.
profession. And then ultimately any business, you ultimately can boil it down to like it's helping people. Otherwise there's nothing there.
Nope.
So I think with that in mind, it's very like whatever word you want to inject there, mindset, energy, vibe,
Yeah.
maybe there's something else, I don't know, but it feels like that's that holistic piece that you bring to your work specifically. It
Yes.
sounds like for women in career who are thinking about making a, what is usually the trigger actually, is it usually a career switch or like a transit, like they're looking for a promotion, or is there a specific?
All over the place. All over the
Yeah.
place. I mean, yeah, promotions happen a lot. Like that's a, hey, I want to go, but I have the degree. Look, I've gone, I got a doctorate, but why can't I not, energetics are usually there. If you've gone all the way up and you can't figure out anywhere else to go, it's probably an energetic thing. But a pivot, yes, I attract a lot of people looking for a pivot because
Mm-hmm.
rebranding and coming up and learning how to make connections with the right kind of people, learning how to operate in a hidden job market, that kind of thing is really important if you're going to make a pivot. Okay. And you don't have to just always be just, I'm desperately looking, who wants me, who wants me? No, who do I want? Who would I like to attract? Owning your power and realizing that all of those strings on your pearl, on your necklace are highly valuable. But how are you going to help others to see, understand, and believe that?
Hmm. I love hearing the overlap and like between like the work that we do with entrepreneurs is there's so many similarities with the work that you do with, in career, because it's a lot of it is, I mean, that the energy piece, the human side, but then
Yeah.
also there's the strategy and the tactics that go along with how are you actually getting it in front of people? How are you
Yep.
speaking up, advocating for yourself as well, like selling yourself? And maybe there's a skills gap, and then that's so the awareness piece as well, right? Like, what are the clear next steps? And you know what? I'm pretty sure I just saw one of your posts on LinkedIn, so this is probably a good place to end. That spoke to this, right? Which is like that idea of motivation versus, well, actually versus nothing. It's the fact that most times when people are not feeling motivated, I think you said they're actually it's just they're not very clear.
Yeah.
And we found the same thing. Anytime someone gets in a funk that we work with, I'm like, well, what are you doing next? They're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. And then as
Yep.
soon as we do, it's like, oh, great, feeling very motivated again. And it's like there's
Yep.
motivation doesn't really disappear. I don't think it's kind of like, well, like energy, right? It's
Mm.
there's some physics something. My co-founder actually has a master's degree in physics, so I should know this, but
Well, no,
it's
you should.
something about energy doesn't disappear, is
Oh,
displaced. You know,
neither created or destroyed that one.
I should have just asked the teacher from the start. That's what I should have done.
Lowell Newton. Yeah.
Yeah. So for people, speaking of LinkedIn and anywhere else, and like the work that you do, if there is someone listening or watching that is thinking of that pivot or promotion or whatever the thing is that's making them think about this, not just career change and journey, but also like that holistic piece, if that sounds attractive to them, where can they find you? Where can they get in touch? Where can they learn more?
Awesome. Well, you can find me these days at LinkedIn. Find me in the DMs or go ahead and just book a free career breakthrough call with me. Love that. I love to hear what's going on with you and see how we can support you and get you shifting from that space you were just talking about, space of like, oh gosh, I'm in a yuck space to wow, this is exciting. I know what I want to get started on.
Hmm.
So find me on LinkedIn or I'm also on Instagram at Permission to Pivot. And yeah, I'd love to connect. It's a beautiful place to be in. And I don't think anybody should have to feel like they're alone in it when they're considering a change, because we all do it. We all do it. Just some of us are so in our own heads where we're not realizing I can do this too. And I'm not alone. I just got to start to talk to people about what I'm considering and realize there's so many people who have done this, right? And I don't have to forge my own new scary path alone.
Hmm. Love that. Yeah, the community piece
Yes.
and help and
Yes.
all of it. We've talked about so
A
many
little
things.
bit of vulnerability goes so far to helping you feel stronger. It really does.
Yeah, I'm getting analogies left and right just popping into mind, but if
Yeah.
hopefully that's also happening to someone that is watching or listening. And with that, I would just encourage people to reach out if they are in that place. And then also just want to take a second to say thank you for taking the time and sharing what you shared and telling us some of your story. Appreciate you taking the time, Alyssa.
Thank you so much. I love you're so skillful at the metaphors and bringing somebody with ADD right back down. So it was fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having me, Riley.
Thanks so much.